You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
It is 7:05 and I'm going to request that the chairman open the meeting for the evening.
Be ashamed of yourself, you know? Be ashamed of yourself.
Okay, Jamie, please mute all of the
Yeah, that's convenient.
except for
It's real
the
convenient.
chairman. It is 7:05, as Commissioner Boda suggested that we start the meeting, and I proceed to do so. Thank you. We are in accordance with Executive Decision 7B, which says that we will conduct this meeting in accordance with the standards of a virtual meeting. At this point in time, I need to do a roll call for who the participating commissioners are. So please, let's see, I'll go down the list. Commissioner Boda?
Present.
Commissioner Rose?
Present.
Commissioner Begeman?
Present.
Commissioner Granalsh? Commissioner Granalsh? Commissioner Kraus? Commissioner Sullivan?
Present.
Excuse me, Peter.
Is present. Thank you, Richard. Is there any Commissioner Kraus? Is there any commissioner that I have not identified? Okay, so we have a roll call. First up, we have on the agenda the minutes.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, the minutes will be held for the regular meeting. So first item of discussion is notice of violation.
Okay.
69 Chestnut
And I
Street.
believe Jamie sent out the information regarding the notice of violation in the Dropbox that was identified in an email to the commissioners. Jamie, you want to frame the violation for us, please?
So it was brought to my attention, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, it was brought to my attention that there was some recent activity at 69 Chestnut Street. I went out to inspect it with the building official as there was an active building permit for the property. Came to my attention that vegetation was removed and the earth was just regraded. I don't know whether or not any material was brought in. It doesn't necessarily appear that there was, but it definitely has been disturbed and regraded into a smoother grade, I think. Well, maybe not smoother grade, but it's been disturbed. And I have some pictures. Also, the property owner has a representative present. We also have a survey for the property. With the current conditions, it does not have grades, grade information, elevations. So does the commission want to start by reviewing photos or the notice of violation that was sent out, or the plan that is on hand?
Jamie, this is Peter Bassman, chairman of the commission. Have you had conversation with the homeowner regarding the violation and what's been the reaction?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I have had conversations with the property owner, and he was very responsive. He did not realize that he needed a permit for the activity that occurred. He asked if he should submit an application. I told him to hold off, given the fact that we had the special meeting. It was an opportunity for the commission to review the situation and determine how to proceed, as the application would not be for receipt until the November regularly scheduled meeting anyways. And as part of that discussion, the area that was disturbed was seeded. I mean, that might have been part of I think that's probably part of the intent from the beginning, but the site has been seeded since I've been out there. There's a silt fence that was installed prior to the land disturbance. So I don't think that there hasn't been any transport of or expansion of the disturbed area from what was intended. Looking at aerials from 2013, I don't think the overall limits of disturbance have changed significantly. However, there is a sloped area that was vegetated previously that is completely bare now. So I issued the notice of violation. I informed him I'd be issuing the notice of violation and requested that either he attend this meeting or have a representative attend this meeting to discuss what activity has gone on and what next steps might be required.
Okay. Is the homeowner on this call?
I am on. This is Joseph. I'm I'm the homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Basserman. Can you give us a little background on this issue?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak. And so just to give you a little context and background, I purchased the property a short time ago. I want to say within the last 6 or 7 months. We had a very lengthy building permit process. This was a severely blighted property that hadn't been updated or paid attention to in decades, and it probably hasn't been maintained as far as the exterior or even the lawn mowed in probably 10 years, without exaggeration. So from the beginning, very lengthy building permit process. It was very close to being a total demolition. We opted to move forward with like a full gut renovation of the property, with the help of the building department and everybody around to move forward. I had no intention of circumventing wetland zoning, the commission, anyone involved. I truthfully had no idea that I would need to get grant permission from Wetlands and Jamie to seed the yard. Basically, what we did was the yard was full of weeds. There was a pre-existing yard lot area that was just, again, weeds as tall as me. And we de-weeded, we turned over existing native topsoil. We didn't bring in anything, and we seeded, fertilized, put up silt fence. And about 75-80% way through the seeding is when we got stopped. So Jamie had mentioned when she came out there, we had a really good conversation. But at that point, we had gotten stopped and not to proceed. So most of the yard is seeded. I would say probably 80% of it. The slope she's talking about, again, we just, out of respect for the board and whatnot, we just stopped at that point to make sure we could have permission to move forward and just, wrap up the project. And again, just to be clear, it was no intention. This is not my, first time renovating a property. My recollection was that anything that was pre-existing from previous, because there's exterior retaining walls and existing yards. I always thought that I could just go back and make it fresh and new and clean it up, not knowing that I'd have to pull a wetlands permit to do so. So in hindsight, I should have talked to Jamie prior and gotten that done. That being said, I also wasn't pointed in that direction from the building department. Not that it's their responsibility, but you know, I had about a 3-month permit process there, and you know, again, in hindsight, I should have probably just contacted Jamie and just let her know what we were going to be doing.
Thank you, Jamie. Peter Basserman. Is the silt fence installed correctly and doing its function?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. It is. There's one section on the. On the eastern side of the site that is down, but it isn't really providing a function at this point, so I'm not concerned about it.
And at this point in time, we are looking forward, again, this is Peter Basserman, looking forward to an application.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I think that's one of the things for the commission to review and confirm if that's the way that they would like to proceed. I know that planning and zoning has also been looking at the activity and that they may be requiring a permit as well. I believe at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Joe, that the extent of the activity you were looking to do has by and large been completed aside from fully establishing the lawn. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As far as the exterior, James, the only thing left for us was just the plantings, you know, for like our landscape beds, etc. But in terms of like the backyard space, you know, even as of this morning, we have actual grass growing. We got lucky with weather and rain and things like that. So we have grass growing. I mean, just to finish off the seating would be nice, you know, on that slope to the left of the property. And as far as exterior activities, that would be complete. And then in terms of zoning, I spoke to Dan yesterday. Michael Bennett did put together a plot plan, and it's still unclear if there's a zoning permit going to be needed, because again, a lot of the items are all pre-existing, like the parking area and the retaining walls. So what he had us add was just the guide rail at the top of the property, which is something that would be added, which is a safety item because the property drops off. So we did add that on there. Dan was off today, so I didn't get to submit it, but my plan is to come by tomorrow morning, submit the updated plot plan, and then Dan will determine what's needed from a planning and zoning standpoint, because it's still not clear if anything's going to be needed in terms of a permit.
Jamie, is your recommendation that we proceed forward with an application from this homeowner and address the issues within the context of that application?
This is Commissioner Boda. Before going to the application, I think that some of the work should be done under a cease and correct order, because the issue with the application is then the applicant can then do the work whenever, right? There's no urgency to the application, and we have no recourse for moving an application forward. So what we can do is, for the immediate work, do it under a cease and correct, so that the work needs to be done in a certain time period. And the property owner, I'm sorry, can you say your name again? I missed it. It was Joe something? No worries.
No worries. It's Joseph Iamuno.
So Mr. Iamuno can also put in an application for some of the finer detail of the work and things that we're going to want to have in the more permanent records. But in order for this to be done expeditiously, we would do it under a cease and correct.
Commissioner Chairman Basserman, this is Eric Rose. I agree with Commissioner Boda. It would also help if we could take a look at the site plan. I understand there was vegetation removal. I'm not clear whether that was in wetland or in upland or outside of that, and wonder if Jamie can just display the site plan and orient us as to what we see in the photographs and where this disturbance took place relative to wetlands and upland review.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I am pulling up the site plan now for screen share. All right. So we do not have a wetland delineation for the property at hand. We do, so this is a survey. We do have a wetland delineation for 77 Chestnut Street, which is located to the northeast of the property. And then we also have a wetland delineation for, I believe it's 5860 East Main Street. So I'm going to temporarily pull up a GIS map with our wetland delineations approximated on it for reference purposes.
What is this is Commissioner Rose, what's the site plan we're looking at? Was that part of the owner's submission for a building permit? What is that plan?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. This was a survey that was submitted upon request in correspondence with the property owner after observing the site changes.
Is this a site plan that was done for the applicant or the subject?
I believe
It was done. This is Joseph. I'm in Orlando. Yeah, I did the site map. I had the site map done. I believe it's dated October 3rd of 2019, prior to purchasing the property, just for my own personal records. As far as permitting, a site map was never required.
And Jamie, you've studied the map, I'm sure. Does anywhere on this site plan in front of us indicate upland review lines or wetland line on any neighboring property?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, it does not.
Okay.
And just so the commissioners know, the date of the plan is, or the survey is March 3rd, 2020.
Excuse me, may I provide some input? My name is Mike Bennett, and I'm Mr. Iamuno surveyor, and I just want to clarify what this plan is. This plan was prepared in March prior to them purchasing the property, and the intent of the survey, it's a property survey, and the intent of it is to show existing occupation, property lines, and zoning requirements. It was prepared for zoning and acquisition of the property. It is not was not prepared as a site plan. Therefore, there's no contours on it. There's no wetlands on it. And that is something we would not normally do for a property zoning survey. Topography and wetlands would be added if, in fact, a site plan had been required or requested by the client. So I don't want to confuse anybody and have them think that this site plan was here to show proposed site work, because it was prepared to show existing conditions on the property, that being, building locations, sidewalks, retaining walls, and occupation around the perimeter property lines.
Mr. Bennett, this is Commissioner Rose. Are you saying that this was prepared for the seller in order to communicate to buyers of the property?
It was prepared for the buyer in order for him to understand what he was buying with respect to the location of the house and property lines.
And you're saying that in that context, it is not your routine to indicate encumbrances like wetlands, upland review areas and wetlands on adjacent properties?
We would only do that if we were aware of the fact that there would be some future construction on it, and it would be requested by the client. That is not something that is normally provided with a zoning location survey for property.
So, and this is Commissioner Boda. I think building on that, that would either had to have come off of state data, or more typically they would have had to hire a soil scientist to flag it. So it wouldn't be from a surveyor.
Yeah, generally what happens in the case is a soil scientist is hired to delineate the wetlands, and then the surveyor goes in and field locates the flags that are set by the soil scientist and adds them to the map.
This is Peter Basserman. I guess the point that we're at right now is whether Commissioner Boda's suggested recommendation of a cease and correct process takes precedent over an application process, given the timing associated with that cease and correct. And I guess are any of the commissioners at this point adverse to a cease and correct condition as the way we proceed? I guess hearing no objection, how do we move forward with it? Go ahead.
So this is Commissioner Boda. Just to clarify, I think that for any of the details that the homeowner wants to do, that is more general to the property, they can still put an application in for that. But for the immediate work that needs to be done to control sediment and erosion, any of the stabilization, that would be done as the cease and correct, so that it can be done immediately. I'm sure Mr. Imino is, he's a new homeowner. He wants to do what he's supposed to do, but I think this way we're on more firm legal ground.
Commissioner Basserman, I understand the legal ground. I also understand, I guess, the timing issue. Jamie, what is the immediacy issue associated with the correction here?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I will pull up some photos from the last time I was out there, which was yesterday. Are you guys seeing the photos?
I do, yep.
So this is adjacent, Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. This is adjacent to the house looking up towards Chestnut Street. This is the part of the site that still has not been seeded. You can see it to the left in this photo. The area has been seeded and hayed, and it is starting to take and he has an erosion control mat on the steeper slope that's been seeded. Again, seed is starting to grow behind the house. The shed used to be located somewhere in this proximity. And you can see that he does have a silt fence spanning the entire length of the rear portion of the site, the low side of the site. I think the outstanding concern is obviously this steep slope that has not yet been vegetated. And
Okay, I see. This is Commissioner Basserman. So I guess if we were to, go down the cease and correct road here, what would be the next steps?
if the commission decided to do a cease and correct, then a just cause hearing would have to be held within 10 days of issuing the cease and correct order. And the commission would outline the actions that need to happen immediately, or the actions that need to happen and what time frame they need to happen.
Okay.
And that would be granting the permission for those activities to occur.
And the 10 days is by statute, so I guess if that's the course of action that the commission wishes to proceed, we need to then set that time frame now. That's a question.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. Yes, so either the cease and correct order could be issued such that the just cause hearing could be at the November regularly scheduled meeting, or the commission could try and do a special meeting referred.
Our next, excuse me, Commissioner Basserman, then our next regular scheduled meeting is when?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. It is November 12th, 2020.
And 10 days, what it was today? Today is the 22nd. So probably a 2-week difference. I guess at this point in time, it looks like we probably should schedule a hearing 10 days, given the statute, 10 days from today. Or is it 10 days from the date of the cease and correct issue?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I believe it's within 10 days of issuing the cease and correct order.
And Commissioner Basserman, I guess given the need to address this quickly, given the growing season, et cetera, it is the wishes of the commission to have a special meeting associated with this public hearing, or wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting. It makes no difference to me, quite frankly. Commissioners want to voice their concern?
This is Commissioner Rose. I guess I'm just wondering if we don't have a chicken and the egg. We have a site where wetlands hasn't been delineated, and therefore we don't know where upland review is. And so how do we know what has happened here?
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that, yes, that is true. And I think that that would be part of the permitting process. And the part of the cease and correct would be to stabilize the property and ensure that no additional work happens beyond, say, for example, the silt fence where it appears that the clearing was done. And then we would move forward with that cease and correct. I'm indifferent to the day. It could be the 3rd, it could be the 5th or the 12th. But then the applicant would have the wetland line delineated for the application process, and then we can make a more informed decision.
So, sorry, I guess I'm going off on a tangent in a certain sense. Where do we derive, this seems kind of unusual, where are we deriving our authority if we have no idea that anything under our jurisdiction exists on the property?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So the commission has generally 100-foot upland review area. This is a map from our GIS with wetland delineations from the 2 neighboring properties that I mentioned previously. 69 Chestnut is located right here. The area that is unvegetated is approximately in this location here. 77 Chestnut Street has a wetland delineation in this approximate location. And I do have the site plans that these 2 delineations came from available if the commission would like to look at that. And then this delineation on 58 East Main Street, there was an accompanying wetland assessment report that was submitted with that, and it identified that the wetland extended to the north, east, and south of the property. So it implies that there may be wetlands on 69 Chestnut, and if there aren't any wetlands on 69 Chestnut, it's certainly within the upland review area. And per the definition of regulated activity, removal of vegetation within the upland review area is a regulated activity,
Of course.
as is earth disturbance.
Thanks very much for clarifying. And now I'm crystal clear. Sorry about that.
No, absolutely.
So at this point in time, if the commission wants to pursue the cease and correct process, I guess it sounds like we need to just pick the date where we have the, by statute, the appropriate meeting.
This is Joseph. I'm the homeowner. If I could just interject for a moment. So as far as finishing stabilization and whatnot, there's obviously no issue there. My intention is to get it done within the 10 days, if not sooner, weather dependent. Just one concern I do have with regard to weather and winter coming. I am also staffed on the actual building for the building department based on direction from the inland wetlands. Would I be able to, I'm not sure how this exactly works, but would I be able to continue the actual building so I could get the house weather tight and closed up? Because right now it's open to the elements. I'm in the middle of the project. There's no windows, there's no doors, there's no siding. Everything is exposed because, of the stoppage. Would you guys be able to comment to the building department as part of the cease and I forgot what you called it, just while I'm fixing the wetlands area or stabilization of the wetlands area or the upland area, would you guys be able to comment to the building department so I may continue with the project?
Commissioner Basserman, you're muted. You're still muted, yeah.
Is Commissioner Basterman there?
Yes. This is Commissioner Voda. He's there. I think he's having some technical issues.
It says unmuted here.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. I guess it would depend on the condition of the cease and correct that was issued. Jamie, how would you proceed here?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So I think, so we've got three things going on right now. There's the notice of violation. The commission wants an application to be submitted. It sounds like the wetland delineation is being requested to be part of the application submission. And then the commission is also looking to issue a cease and correct order to ensure that site stabilization is made a priority and completed in a timely fashion. So the cease and correct order will not, sorry, I'm thinking out loud. So I don't know that necessarily the comment towards stop work on the building is tied to the cease and correct order so much as maybe the process in general. But I guess from a wetland impact standpoint, the question would be, what impact would the building construction have on the ability to stabilize the site and to not create further impact? Would there be stockpiling of materials on site as part of the?
No, so, Joseph, yeah. So there would be no stockpiling of obviously anything if you're, in the rear yard or anything actually in the front yard for that matter. As I mentioned, like that, the intention would be to be able to finish side the home, install windows, doors, continue construction. It's just it's a bare site right now. I can't have it open to the elements too much longer. And in my opinion, and Michael Bennett, you could interject. anything more in terms of the actual building of the house, I don't think would have any adverse effect to do anything with the wetlands that I'd be doing outside. It's all interior work or actual like home renovation work, nothing actually land related. And I will hold off on any even landscaping, mulching, on all those items as well. Just the actual construction, I'd like to be able to continue.
So this is Commissioner Rose. Is the work being done entirely renovation and rehabilitation of an existing structure, or has anything been added to the structure?
It's an existing It's a renovation of an existing structure, a full renovation of an existing structure.
Okay. So, Commissioner Basserman, this is Commissioner Rose. This is an existing building. Nothing in our regulations should prevent him from proceeding on the care and maintenance of the building that is existing on this property. It seems to me that he can be limited to street parking and front yard use and personnel access to the perimeter of the building, ladders and so forth, without jeopardizing either his rights or anything with respect to wetlands. We should encourage him to continue with his work and get his building done while the site is overseen by under a cease and correct.
Commissioner Rose, I concur. I guess that we ought to be articulate at that in the cease and correct.
Understood.
Commissioner Greenwald, I agree with Commissioner Greenwald. I agree with Commissioner Rose, and I do think we should put something in there that just indicate in the cease and correct order that acknowledges that, so that the building department will release him to go ahead.
This is Commissioner Boda. I agree. The only piece that I would modify is I don't know that we need to have him wait until the cease and correct hearing, because the focus of the cease and correct would really be about the earth around within the property, but not within the confines of the foundation. So if the work is all to be done within the foundation or the footprint of the house, then I don't think that the homeowner should need to wait until the cease and correct hearing, and then he could continue to work on the house within the footprint of the house, but not beyond. Would that meet your needs?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes. Joseph, I
Just and a little tweak to that, Commissioner Boda. He needs to have perimeter access for whether it be ladders or scaffold around the building to address the building. Mm-hmm. So it's a little farther than the perimeter of the foundation, but it's not permitting anything with respect to site work at large. It's just to access and work on the construction of the building itself.
Yes, so this is Commissioner Boda. I agree, and then I also agree that any of the vehicles should be parked on the street.
This is Commissioner Basserman. So in proceeding forward, should we at this point in time have staff issue a letter indicating the process for proceeding to include Commissioner Rose's comments regarding scaffolding, etc., and then schedule quickly, I gather, a cease and correct hearing in accordance with statute? Would that be a way to proceed?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So if the commission would like, we could get the letter sent out tomorrow and try and hold a special meeting on the 29th, which would be next Thursday. Or if you wanted to do the first Thursday of November, we would get the letter out some point next week so that it would meet the 10 days.
Commissioner Basserman, my concern is if we do it next Thursday, I'm counting absentee ballots, and we may still be counting absentee ballots post the 3rd. So if possible, I would just as soon try to have the meeting on the 29th. Does that work for other members of the commission?
This is Commissioner Boda. Can we do the 29th? Does it have to be within the 10 days, not at the 10 days?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So our regulations, which follow the state statute, state within 10 calendar days of the issuance of such order, the agency shall hold a hearing to provide the person opportunity to be heard and show cause why the order should not remain in effect. The agency shall consider the facts presented at the hearing and within 10 days of completion of the hearing, notify the person by certified mail return receipt requested that the original order remains in effect, that a revised order is in effect, or that the order has been withdrawn.
So if Commissioner Basserman, if you were to issue the cease and correct tomorrow, the 23rd, 10 days would give us up until the 6th or 7th of November. Is that correct?
No,
No.
Commissioner Reynolds, I don't think that works out calendar-wise. If the 29th is a week from today, if you go the following week, you're going to be 14 days.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Grinalds. Commissioner Basserman, is that 10 calendar days, Jamie, or is that 10 business days? What does the statute again say?
Frederick and the wetland agent, it's 10 calendar days.
10 calendar days. Then Commissioner Grinalds is correct. So that would suggest then that we need to have the meeting on the 29th.
Or delay sending the letter. Jamie
Or
Frederick
delay, okay. But I don't know that we're well served by delaying the letter.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, we have the property owner present. Would a special meeting on October 29th work for you?
I'm good with whatever you guys decide. The work's going to be done, I would say, by Monday or Tuesday, the latest. So in my opinion, the sooner you could send a letter, the better, and we could hopefully put this behind us. I guess it's the call of the commission, but I don't need a full 10 days. My intention is to get the work done immediately.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, and the letter is effective upon issuance, and the commission again grants, either upholds, modifies, or makes a decision at the meeting. So if all parties are in agreement on certain activities that need to happen, there's no reason why those activities couldn't happen prior to the just cause hearing, once the cease and correct order has been issued. So the cease and correct order, the commission wants stabilization of the site. So I'm assuming seeding. Does the commission want to require erosion control blankets or anything? Or does the property owner have any specific plans on how to stabilize the remaining area that has not been seeded yet?
This Commissioner Rose. It seems to be that fundamental to this is that the wetlands get flagged immediately if it exists on this property, to make clear where our jurisdiction lies and what it is we're trying to protect. And this question is for the property owner. Has the building department stopped you as well?
Yes.
So we should also decide right now whether a letter can be generated quickly, Jamie, or a phone call to building that allows him to proceed with the construction we talked about.
Joseph, to be clear, and we had a site meeting. So I had to revise a building change for Tony at the building department. That was done on Tuesday. It's been submitted. Tony from the building department is actually waiting on direction from Wetlands to give me the go-ahead to proceed.
Commissioner Grenolch, I think we should give that okay.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think we can fold that into the cease and correct order to identify the limits of activity that is approved along with that, again, in regards to any necessary scaffolding. And I'll CC the building department on that, and they can let me know if they have any questions.
And Jamie, Joseph, I mean, to be clear, as far as completing the erosion control, my plan was to proceed as we were. So more erosion blankets, seeding, haying, the remainder of the site, which is not much left, as you know, but the hill in question, seeded, erosion control, and just basically finish covering the rest of what's left in terms of scope.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I do think it also would be beneficial to get the wetland delineation as soon as possible.
Agreed.
So if that can be made available for the meeting next week, I think that would be ideal. Does the commission want to make that a requirement of the cease and correct order?
Commissioner Bassman, I think that Commissioner Rose has articulated, it's important to have that delineation done. Should be done for the next meeting. It sounds like, Jamie, your recommendation is that we need not send a separate letter, that everything be incorporated into the cease and correct, that be issued somewhat immediately, that a copy be sent to the building department so that they're clued in as to what's proceeding here. Have we covered all the bases at this point in time?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think I agree with most of what you just said, although I don't think there necessarily needs to be a separate letter unless the commission wants to address it.
No, excuse me, this is Commissioner Bassman. That's what I said. Everything would be incorporated into that cease and correct. There would not be the need for a separate correspondence.
Sorry. Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Joe, did you have a comment regarding the wetland delineation?
No. I'm fine with it. The only thing I was going to say, James, is it's Friday. I'll make the call. I'll speak with my surveyor, and I'll just get them out as soon as possible. So for the wetland delineation, I haven't done a ton of that work in the past. So is it a 1 or 2 day process? I don't know, but I'll get them flagged as soon as possible. And I'll start as soon as I get the letter, hopefully tomorrow, and I could have people working over the weekend for the erosion control and the completion of the work.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, absolutely. And I can give you a list of soil scientists if you would like that have done work in town previously. And also, even if you can just get the wetlands flagged, so that way maybe I can run out and take some pictures for the commission so they can see the relative location to the silt fence, even if it's not put on the survey or even if you haven't received the wetland report yet. I think that would be beneficial.
Perfect. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
May I interrupt for a second, please? It's Mike Bennett from Bennett Smilus. I had contact. We normally use Robert Russo. He's a certified soil scientist in the state of Connecticut. I did contact him when Joe first called me about this meeting and tried to get him out there before the meeting that we're having tonight. He was unable to. I will contact him again, first thing tomorrow morning to do my darndest to get him out there early next week.
Thank you, Ms. Commissioner Mesman. Thank you for that comment. Good luck with that.
Commissioner Boda, I think Commissioner Grenolch was wanting to say something.
Yes, Commissioner Grenolch. I don't think that, it's maybe possible, but I don't think we should make a requirement that they have a map showing the wetlands by next Thursday. That's a little bit pushing the envelope too much. He should be able to get it by our next regular scheduled meeting on November 12th.
Agreed. Commissioner Rose, I agree with that.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Just a really specific question about fertilizer, which was mentioned. If there's going to be stabilization done, what are the rules regarding restrictions of fertilizer if it's near a wetland, possibly near a wetland? I'm just, because fertilizer was mentioned and we don't know if there's wetland or not. And anybody know?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. There's not a blanket standard that we have. If the commission has any concerns, I encourage them to express them.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Boda. I agree with Commissioner Begemon. I think at this point there shouldn't be any fertilization put down. Additionally, there was a comment about filter fabric or erosion control mats, and anything that's laid down really ought to be a natural fiber and not plastic. Those are the couple of things that, as you're looking toward the solutions for the cease and correct, two things that should be adhered to.
Is Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, does the commission want to require the submission of an application as part of the cease and correct order, or request that an application is submitted, since it sounds like the property owner is already willing to do such?
This is Commissioner Boda. I don't think that we have to require it, but I think that the homeowner is going to want to do it because they won't be able to do anything beyond, that immediate stabilization. And I suspect that, he's got a much more detailed plan. So I don't think that we have to require it. And then just a side note for our own records and documentation, I'm wondering why this wasn't referred to us from the building commission. That's odd. We often get things pushed to us from them, and I'm wondering why this didn't happen. That's not a question for the homeowner, but perhaps something to look at internally.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, the reason why it wasn't referred to us was because the building application was for an internal renovation of the house, probably exterior renovation as well, but we don't usually get put in for review on siding and window applications. So it didn't meet the threshold for receiving our review.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other comments at this point? I think we have a course of action here.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, just to confirm, issuing a cease and correct order and looking to schedule a special meeting for October 29th to hold the just cause hearing. Does the commission want to have that meeting at 7 p.m.?
Commissioner Bassman, that works for me. $7 o'clock, going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you for your comments, and look to see you on the 29th.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have essentially the lion's share of why we are meeting tonight, and that is the regulation discussion. The information was part of the Dropbox information that staff provided to the commission. And I guess, Jamie, why don't you take it from here as to how we review the material that you submitted.
I'd like to ask, if I could, if the public can speak to this at some point. And if not, why not?
At this point in time, I would say it is a not at this time condition.
Chairman,
the commission, go ahead.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think it wouldn't be inappropriate to allow brief comment, and then more, there will be a public hearing later on in the process where full comment can be provided, but if there's a brief comment on the process, I think the commission could listen to that.
I appreciate that.
Before we go down that road, Commissioner Basserman, does anybody on the commission feel opposed to having a brief comment by the public?
So this is Commissioner Boda. I did go to the Connecticut Deep website, and there is an outline for regulation amendments, and it indicates that following the proposed amendment, that the amendment and the notice of the public hearing must be submitted 35 days. So it doesn't really talk about anything prior to that. It's really narrowly focused on what happens once the amendment is proposed. And so that is the guidance from the Connecticut Deep.
Commissioner Boda, thank you for the review. This is Commissioner Basserman. I guess given the fact that it is not outlined within the statutes, and the request is for a brief comment, I guess we can, as staff indicated, entertain that as long as it is brief. We are in a little bit of a, I guess, an unknown position here. And if it goes to extend beyond a brief comment, I think we're going to curtail the discussion before we have a discussion with our own town council about the extent of the comments prior to the commission reviewing the amendments that are being suggested. So I guess given the fact that we are on a little bit of uncertain territory here, we can go ahead and allow a brief comment. Mr. Cook, if you want to proceed, be my guest.
I appreciate that. And ironically, your comment about my comment is probably going to be a lot longer than my comment. But that said, all I wanted to express to this commission, and you know I have a history with the commission, you know there's litigation going on. I didn't come to discuss that. However, as some of you may recall, in your process of amending or formulating or whatever regulations, there has not always been the best communication between, in general, the Wetlands Commission and the public, to the point where a few years ago, there was an effort, and I don't need to go into the details because that's really not important, to push through regulations without the public even participating. Now, again, is it going to happen now? No, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure you guys have standards, but I wanted to call it to your attention so that when you do come forth with new regulations, amendments to regulations, whatever, that there's ample opportunity for the public, first of all, to comment, which I assume there will be, and secondly, that the public knows that such a public hearing is pending and what the regulations are that are being considered. And that's it. Pretty simple.
Commissioner Basserman, thank you for the comment, Mr. Cook. As you heard Commissioner Boda suggest, there are statutes and regulations regarding how we proceed when we make amendments to the regulations. As such, those regulation changes would be notified in accordance with, again, both town regulations as well as state statutes, so that the public is aware, number one, that in fact that area is going to be discussed. It would be discussed within a public forum. We would entertain at that point in time public comment, and the commission would reflect upon those comments as they incorporate those comments into their review of the regulations. So you know that we are going to go down that road, follow those appropriate regulations and statutes, and that the public will have ample opportunity not only for notice, but also be able to participate in the form of comments.
That's fine, and I just want you to know just quickly that, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's my opinion that not this commission, but prior commissions have not always done that. I'm just going to go on a record and say that, but if you're going to do it, that's good with me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, Jamie, can you, at this point in time, then take us through the material that was included in the Dropbox for the commission review regarding those regulations?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So back in 2018, as we discussed at the last meeting where we briefly introduced picking this back up, there were some comments that were compiled by staff regarding possible changes to the regulation revisions. So we distributed that at, I believe it was a special meeting in September, and hopefully commissioners have had a bit of time to take a look at it. Since that meeting, I have tried to add some additional comments to help clarify points that were already brought up, and also bring up a couple of other points that were either brought up at the September meeting or that came up during my review of the 2018 document. So if the commission would like, we can kind of bounce back and forth between the two documents and just run through everything. And the intent is to help guide conversation. Obviously, if commission has any additional things that they want to consider or different thoughts, please bring them up. So, and I do also,
Mr. Vasserman, Jamie, is there a rank order in terms of importance or impact in your mind in terms of the suggested changes? In other words, is there one that is kind of glaringly in need of review as opposed to others where the issues may not be so profound?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent, I have not ordered them as you've described, but I would certainly say there are some that are more pressing than others.
Can we review them with that kind of context?
Sure. I will try to do that. Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent.
Jamie, of all the documents in the Dropbox, okay, this is the one. Got it.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna. So there's this document, Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent, and a supplemental update document that I have done. So I'm going to run through them in order. Section 2.1 is our definitions, and there was a minor change to the definition of compensation just to clean it up. I remove and or preservation from the definition, as preservation is not compensation. And then it came up at the last meeting that there was no definition of agent, when in fact there's a definition of duly authorized agent. So there was a request that we add agent back in and just reference see duly authorized agent. So I think as we go through this document, if the commission can just kind of confirm whether these are changes they want to move forward with, we can then work on creating a draft document, which would then be made available to the public and go through the whole public hearing regulation amendment process. So are those two definition revisions things that we should be putting in that revision? Any questions?
Commissioner Bassford, are you going to essentially look at each area where we're looking to amend the definition, or is this going to be some kind of global change?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I think we're just looking at areas that have previously come up or that have come up during day-to-day business as things that might need clarification or minor modification. So in section 2.1, those are the two definitions that I would say are currently being looked at for modification. So it would be, again, removing from the definition of compensation and or preservation, and then in adding a definition, adding agent as a term and referencing see duly authorized agent for the definition. So that way if somebody's trying to look up agent, they don't think we don't have a definition because they don't know the term duly authorized agent. which makes a lot of sense. So,
Commissioner Basserman, thank you. Okay, that's great. Yep,
okay.
understand.
Well, and this is Commissioner Boda, and I think the other thing about this modification is that it doesn't change substantially the regulations. It's a point of clarification to make the regulations easier for everyone to use.
Yep, okay. Continue.
So the next, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, the next section that had been set aside to look at is section 710 of the regulations, which pertains to compensation. I believe that this language used to be in section 11 of the regulations, and that is the decision process and permit. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. One of the comments I had while I was reviewing this document, 710 reads, if compensation is proposed or required as a condition of approval, a management plan is required that must include, and then it goes on. 710 or section 7 is application requirements. So to have as a criteria required as a condition of approval doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I was thinking that it might make more sense to use language such as if compensation is proposed or instead of if compensation is proposed or required as a condition of approval, use at the discretion of the agency or its duly authorized agent, or if compensation is required for section 7.9 of these regulations. And that's consistent with language that we used for section 7.8. If you want.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Rose. Just a general comment. When you're a drafting issue, if you have a defined term, the first letter of that word should always be capitalized throughout the regulation. So compensation being defined, it should be used as capital C from now on.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent noted.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, was this the language that we're looking at in the current regulations, was that changed at the time of the last regulation change, or has this been in there for some period of time?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, this language has been in there for, I believe, a period of time, but like I said, I think, and I can check it right now, I'm sorry. This used to be section 11.12, so it used to be decision process and permit. So it used to kind of be more of, I think, guidance for the commission in making a decision and maybe determining conditions of approval. And during the last revision, the commission decided it was more appropriate to make it part of the application requirements, as this is information that an applicant is required to submit. And it references back to section 7.9 of the regulations. So I think just the fact that it got moved to a different location kind of changes the context of the situation. And that's why I'm suggesting possibly looking at revising that language.
Thank you. I appreciate the context now more than I did previously. Thank you.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. Just a logistical question. So I'm holding the document with the comments embedded. What is the name of this document in the Dropbox? I can't see it.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. It's staff notes 2020-1022.
Thank you.
And these documents are available in the Dropbox that's linked to on the top of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Okay. This Commissioner Basserman, that seems to be an improvement in alignment regarding the regulations, I don't have any issues with the suggested language at this point.
All right, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I think the next step after this meeting will be trying to merge these two documents and any new comments that come up tonight into one document and send that out for review by the commissioners. So we will move forward with doing a track change proposal for this language.
Yep.
I'm not sure how to share two PDFs side by side, so I'm going to be bouncing back. I apologize for that. Section 710B, the language is very confusing regarding when reports are required. So we were looking to clean that up a little bit. Looking at the 2018 notes, I think a little bit more refinement might be beneficial. So the proposed language from 2018 says reports to be submitted upon completion of planting, towards the end of the first growing season, and towards the end of the growing season for a period of at least 5 years from the initial planting. Reports must be submitted by a qualified ecologist or wetland specialist or a duly authorized agent as approved by the agency, and must document an 85% or better survival rate of planted wetland vegetation. Reports should be conducted early enough that concerns can be addressed before the end of the growing season. And then it goes on to also require monitoring and control of invasive species, approved erosion and sedimentation control measures, and then, or any other activity as specified in best management practices as defined in section 2.1 of these regulations. So I think one of the questions I had was regarding monitoring and control of invasive species. Does the commission want to provide a little bit more context regarding that? Is that monitoring and control of invasive species for 5 years? Is that 5 years plus long-term maintenance plan? And
this is Commissioner Basserman. I see you deleted intervals of 6 months. And I guess my question is, after the first growing season, is it in some respect there is no requirement associated with timing a la 6 months. The next thing is 5 years. So are we not seeing things on a 6 month interval?
so what it had read before was intervals of 6 month, 1 year, and thereafter annually for a period of no less than 5 years. So the way that it was, 1 minute, I'm getting a little backwards. The way that it's currently written is report intervals of 6 months, 1 year, and thereafter annually for a period of no less than 5 years. So the reporting time overall is the same, but what the language is trying to do is clarify that the report should be towards the end of the growing season. So if they were to plant, say, at the end of the growing season, the report in 6 months would be towards the beginning of the growing season for the next year. So I think what the intent was to try and so alternatively, you could use end of growing season, you could say end of September, beginning of October. I think that's where the direction was going. But the overall one at the end of the first growing season, and then for 5 years from the initial planting.
Okay, so essentially you're substituting the growing season for the 6 month interval.
Right.
Okay.
I think Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I think the 6 month was supposed to capture the end of the first growing season.
Okay.
Which is why it was a shortened time frame.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Boda. I just wanted to affirm that I prefer the growing season as the point in which we should be getting reports. I think that is clearer and more to the idea of what's meant to be happening. So
this is Commissioner Bassman. So I guess you would be supportive of the new language, Commissioner Boda?
Yes, there's one tweak a little bit later in that I want to address, but I can wait a moment.
Why don't you go ahead and fill us in on your other comment?
So just following that, and prior to the next, right now I'm on the 18, and there is a track changes that starts with report should. And just before that, it's not marked off, but it says planted wetland vegetation, and I think it should just be vegetation, because we do have vegetation that's monitored, that is in the upland review area and meant to protect. Its function is to protect the wetland, and so I think that it's not wetland vegetation, it's just vegetation.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, I was noticing that as I read it out loud as well. So just to kind of expand on that, should it be of planted vegetation or of planted mitigation or compensation plantings? Because I guess what I'm getting at is, do you want to try and make the distinction between the mitigation plantings and the general landscaping plantings that are on site?
So this Commissioner Boda, I think that it has to be in service of the regulated areas. So I then, to that end, I think it would have to be wetland mitigation and any what they might term, I don't want to put the word in here, but as like buffer plantings. I don't want to use the word buffer.
Can you just say the approved plantings? I mean, this is...
Well, so I think that gets to this, Commissioner, but I think that gets to Jamie's question, which is there are approved plantings that are, say, nearer to whatever it is that's being built, that we are less concerned of because they're ornamentals and whatever, you know, they'll want to replace them or they won't, but they're not, their function isn't to protect the wetland. And so I think to Jamie's point, it's really about vegetation that's either in the wetland or adjacent to and in service of.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. Another question I had regarding this section was I believe it currently and proposed says a period of no less than 5 years. So does the commission want to provide some context of what could extend it, such as on my 2020 supplement notes, I have just draft proposed possible language: failure to comply with the 85% survival rate and invasive species control may extend the 5-year monitoring period.
Mm-hmm.
So should we?
Mr. Bassman, I think that's a good add-on.
Jamie,
go ahead.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, just to expand on that, the current structure of the section with the monitoring and control of invasive species being below, it might need to kind of be reshaped, if you will, to accommodate that. Either that or it would be its own bullet, I suppose. Because or maybe the monitoring and control of invasive species gets moved into B to make it clear that the reports are to include that information. Which kind of, again, gets back into the does the commission want to provide more context on monitoring and control of invasive species? Which,
So this is Commissioner Boda. I think, well, there was two things. One, I think there are instances where the commission was intentionally kept it more open, because the more narrow we make our definitions, the more or wording, the more we sort of run into situations that we didn't plan for and couldn't have planned for when we were thinking about the language for the regulations. And so I think that in some ways having it broader, that we can then use interpretation to make sense of, because there are so many scenarios we can't plan for.
absolutely. Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent.
Commissioner Bassman, I guess the only question I have is there anything regarding statute or case law or whatever that would restrict us to the 5-year, or are we okay to the extent that we have conditions that would allow us to, for instance, continue the monitoring beyond the 5-year time frame?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I don't think there's anything that restricts to 5 years. I think the one area it might get kind of gray is if a permit is expiring. I don't really know what would happen in that scenario.
Well, and Commissioner Boda, I think also, Chairman Basserman, to your question, I think that it's language that mimics the state. And so I think that the 5 is fine, and then extending it as needed when they don't meet the criteria, because I think that I feel like 10 was somewhere if it didn't, if they started having failures up to 10, but I don't remember where that was from.
Okay, I mean, I think this is kind of narrowing the comments that we need to consider for inclusion as we go forward with the amendment, and to the extent that we uncover some additional information that would give us cause to pause, fine. But at this point in time, I think it's probably a prudent recommendation that staff has suggested.
Chairman Basserman, this is Commissioner Rose. Two just drafting comments. In the last sentence of Section B, I always find comments like early enough sort of bothersome when you're both an applicant and a regulation or regulatory body. Growing seasons are pretty well established. We ought to be able to say that reports should be conducted or provided X number of weeks before the end of any particular growing season. And in Section E, should not start with or. That actually creates a problem that could exclude the prior items. It should just begin with the word any.
Commissioner Bassman, let me look at that. Let's see. You're saying the last one, E, huh? Okay.
Yep.
And Commissioner Begman, maybe in B where it says, and towards the end of the growing season for a period of at least 5 years, it might be clear if we said, and towards the end of each growing season for a period of at least 5 years. I think there was some confusion.
I was referring to the last sentence where it says conducted early enough that concerns.
Yes, I'm responding to just a totally new thought.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So Commissioner Rose, your suggestion on the last highlighted area in the current regulation 710B would read reports should and then complete.
Be conducted, for example, 6 weeks before the end of the growing season, or 4 weeks or 8 weeks, something other than early enough, which is gray and subjective.
Okay. Staff, where are you at on that?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I certainly understand the sentiment. And I don't know that I necessarily have a recommendation of 4 or 6 other than.
Staff, this is Commissioner Bassman. I guess the concern is early enough is a little too fluid, and it would be good to establish whatever the number is, but a numerical equivalent rather than the words early enough. So why don't we take that under advisement for the next round?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent noted.
And then Commissioner Begeman had a different thought.
That was also Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. That was noted as well. And Abby actually had the same comment earlier today.
Oh.
Okay.
But I didn't share it with you guys, so.
Gotcha. And then I think the Commissioner Rose's comment was on E, to eliminate the or.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I agree with that as well.
Okay.
And it is also noted.
Great. Moving right along. Are we done with 710?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I am if the commission is. 712 is a lower priority item and maybe not necessarily a regulation revision so much as maybe a practice change or so the regulation currently.
Excuse me, this is Commissioner Bassman. Can you post that?
Yeah, 1
Or
minute.
scroll that, or however we get that in front of the screen.
So, yep, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, while I'm looking it up, this is the section that requires, or that outlines the number of copies that are required to be submitted. And particularly right now with COVID and not all commissioners wanting paper copies, I'm just wondering, if we're not using all of the paper copies, should we try and provide a mechanism where we're informing applicants the appropriate number of copies rather than having 4 extra copies of application materials sitting in our office that are just going to get recycled at the end of the project without anyone utilizing them. So unless otherwise directed, so right there's the ability to reduce the amount of copies. Unless otherwise directed by the Inland Wetlands Agency, 12 copies of the completed application form, narrative and soil scientist report, 3 copies, 3 full sets of maps/plans, 11 legible reduced size maps/plans, and drainage summaries, 2 full drainage reports, and application fee shall be submitted to comprise a complete application. Additionally, digital files of all materials submitted may be required by the agency.
This is Commissioner Bassman. This allows, I guess, for a maximum of 12 copies, but as the 712 starts, you can always direct the applicant for some lesser number, correct?
Correct. Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. After further thought, I thought this might make more sense. It's just a modification on the application form to kind of direct applicants to contact us to confirm.
Yeah, continuing, Commissioner Bassman, I guess to the extent that commission members change and there may be with a different group of commissioners, a different set of needs in terms of who wants paper copies and not, then to the extent we reduce this and the membership changed and they wanted copies, then we're back to, changing the regulations again. So I guess if 12 is the maximum number, why can't we just leave it as that, and then you direct as you see fit the number of copies based on who wants paper and who's happy with a Dropbox?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent noted. Yeah, and that's basically the approach we were taking. We weren't going to reduce the amount of copies so much as further elaborate on how they could be reduced, which I don't think is necessary or appropriate. on further consideration for the regulations. So unless anyone has any additional comments, moving on.
Yep.
Oh, I think I skipped over section 9 point, oh wait, no, sorry. Section 9.5. Section references section 8.2, not section 8.3. So in section 9.3 or 9.5, in the case of any application which is subject to the notification provisions of section 8.3 of these regulations, a public hearing shall not be conducted until the clerk of the adjoining municipalities has received notice of the pending application. As you can see, I've copied section 8.2 down below, and that is the section that should be referenced. So it's just a correction that we can move forward with adding to the compiled document for next time, unless anyone has any questions.
Commissioner Bassman, so this is, if you will, a clarification amendment?
It's a typo correction. Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, I think it used to be section 8.3 and it changed, so.
Oh, okay. Got you. Got you. All right. I see. Thank you. Next up.
So next up is section 11.8, which has to do with permit expiration dates. This language was added / updated in the last regulation revision per public acts, so changes to statute that governs the commission. In the last reg revision, the commission also revised the definition of agency to be just the commission. So one of the proposed changes is to add agency or its duly authorized agent, as the duly authorized agent also will submit permits for minor activities, and this would apply to those permits as well. There's a couple notes in here about confirming expiration dates for agent approvals and commission approvals are the same, and they are. And then I believe I had a couple of additional notes that I noticed while I was looking at this. One of which I didn't confirm it, but it looks like there's no space between 2011 and that simple typo. Second to last sentence, use of can should be changed to shall. Permit issued.
Where is that, Jamie? I'm sorry.
So it's in the last sentence here. Notwithstanding the provisions set forth above in this section of the regulations, any permit issued by the agency or its duly authorized agent prior to July 1st, 2011 that was in effect and did not expire prior to May 9th, 2011 shall be valid for a period not less than 9 years after the date of such approval. And then it goes on to say, and can be renewed so long as, per statute, it should say, and shall be renewed so long as the total duration is not, or wait.
And pardon my ignorance, but the shall versus can, and you have less wiggle room with a shall. Is that the idea?
Jamie Frederick in the wetland agent. I actually, upon reading this fully, I'll have to double check, but I believe it's per statute shall. The reason why I'm hesitant is there's two criteria that the commission takes into consideration when granting a renewal or an extension of a permit, and that is, as specified above, agency finds that there has been a substantial change in circumstances which requires a new permit application or an enforcement has been undertaken. So I think
just for clarification, this Commissioner Masterman. So absent those conditions, then there's no question that the permit should be renewed.
Correct.
So that shall is more of in line with that thinking as opposed to a can, which suggests that there's a choice involved.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Correct. That.
Okay. Thank you. Let me ask you: Is this in line with the model regulations? this new language?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. It's in line with the Public Act. Well, it's by and large in line with the Public Act language. So anytime there's a Public Act that it affects inland wetland agencies, DEEP puts forth a Public Act advisory outlining what the changes are and proposed essentially model reg language. So this is, I want to say 2011 was when this changed. It was around then, I'm not sure. But bottom line, these changes happened after the latest model regulation was put out. So this is based off of an amendment to the model regs.
Model regs, okay. Thank you.
I think that's it, unless anyone has any additional questions.
No, I do not. Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, as a, I guess, and maybe we're not ready to deal with this in this evening's discussion, but we had clearly issues with fees. Are we waiting on another meeting for a fee discussion?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, we're going in order of the regulations in that section 19, so I do have some notes regarding that.
Okay.
So unless the commission wants to table it to another meeting, we can start diving into that tonight as well. Section 13 is the bond requirement section. This has come up a couple of times regarding surety bonds, especially in larger projects. Permit holders look to use surety bonds so that they're not upfronting the cash for the usually large bond that is required. So currently per section 13.1, if the bond totals over $10,000, then the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency may approve a surety bond for no more than 50% of the bond amount.
Commissioner Basserman, I guess other commissions in the town, etc., would this be in line with what other commissions allow regarding surety bonds, or help me understand whether we're kind of a one-off here or whether this really should be in compliance with what other commissions are viewing surety bonds as well?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So I'm not terribly familiar with other agencies' bonding requirements. I'm most familiar with planning and zonings, and I know that their enabling statutes pertaining to bonds and what they can and cannot require are different. So I think to hold ourselves to what planning and zoning is restricted to is not necessarily necessary and may or may not be what the commission wants to do. So certainly I think the commission, it would be appropriate if the commission wants to look at changing the amount that can be a surety, whether surety versus cash. But I think what was highlighted in this document in particular is the fact that it says it may approve a surety bond of no more than 50%, but there's no criteria. So there should either be criteria or remove the may and put will accept or something, so that way it doesn't have to go to the commission for a decision each time.
This is Commissioner Basserman, just a suggestion, please other commissioners chime in here. You know, my concern is, especially when you're talking about money, that we may want to get just town council to chime in on this one, as to what the degree of freedom is that we have in this area.
I would agree. I think that I certainly don't feel qualified necessarily to determine what is and isn't appropriate as far as the regulations. So I think that getting guidance from the town council, and I think also looking at what other similar type towns do is also helpful.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, is this in regards to acceptance of cash versus surety that we're kind of talking about at this point?
Commissioner Bassman, I guess for me, it's not only that, but it's the idea of 50%. I mean, obviously we have some needs, if you will, for the bond in the first place. And to the extent that cash may be holding feet to the fire, closer than other instruments, etc. So I don't know if I'm, as Commissioner Boda talked about, qualified to make that assessment. But I think here we need a little more information before we immortalize this in the form of, a regulation.
This is Commissioner Rose. So I question why we're hanging up on the dollar amounts when if we need a bond, we need a bond. And whether they provide cash or a surety, we should leave the applicant to whatever options they want to accomplish the goal. What really matters to, if I were on the applicant side, is what's the trigger for a bond? What is the scope of work that is being covered by a bond? At what point does that kind of scope of work trigger the need for a bond? I don't have a recollection of the regulations as well as other people on the commission. So when I start off with 13.1, upon approval of the application, it just dives right into a bond. And how did I get here? Because it seems to me that the real issue is, when are we going to require a bond? And is there a formula that arrives at the amount of that bond so people can predict that? How they cover the bond, whether it's with cash or surety or anything, seems to me, unless we have some other agenda, why would we limit their options to provide the bond we're requiring?
Well, Commissioner Rose, I appreciate the comment. I guess the question then that stimulates for me is, do we need to have a larger discussion about the bonds, the use of, when they're applied, where they're appropriate, and then what are the mechanisms, et cetera, associated with a bond? Would the commission benefit from a kind of a review of bonds in general before we start tinkering here with particular language about cash versus surety?
Yeah, so that's where I'm going. I mean, cash, surety, or whatever is kind of the wet tail wagging the dog. But, both the general public and the commission have an interest in ensuring that things that we require get done. And it ought to be predictable under what circumstances we want more than the verbal assurance of an applicant. Not just, we wake up today and decide that today we want a bond from this guy for this project. There should be some predictable means by which we arrive at requiring a bond and arriving at the amount of that bond. And then you can talk about what form of bond you want to take, but I don't think that that's as important.
As Commissioner Bassman, I guess I concur. I would certainly benefit from kind of a view at 20,000 feet rather than 5,000 feet here as to how we apply bonds and the criteria associated with that. So Jamie, maybe at this point in time we table 13.1 until we're able to have a fuller discussion.
This is Commissioner Boda. Jamie, do you think that it would be possible to try to pull together, if there is additional guidance that's come out from the state with respect to like this question around what triggers the bonds in that way, just so that we can, if there's state language that can support our thinking around it, not necessarily within the model regs, but like the documentation that I found earlier that was guidance about reg revisions, that maybe something like that would be helpful, educational.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I'm not sure of documentation that exists pertaining to bonds in that format, but I can certainly take a look and request, see if Darcy Winther from Deep can provide or confirm whether or not there is anything.
This Commissioner Bassett, I've had a little bit of discussion with Darcy regarding bonds, and I don't think there's a lot of, quote, written information, but she is aware of how other areas have treated bonds. So to Commissioner Boda's suggestion, it may be worthwhile having a conversation with her, and maybe there is more recent information than I've since the time that I talked with Darcy.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So I've written down quite a few notes here based on the discussion. And if the commission would like, I can kind of maybe create a document that's kind of more ready to go with the other things we've discussed and separate this out with some thoughts, some additional information, and maybe it'll work out timing wise. We can do it all together, or maybe the commission will say we really want to take our time with this and table it for now.
Commissioner Bassman, Jamie, this is, I assume this is one that's kind of nice to deal with, but is there anything pressing in the bond area that we need to address maybe more quickly than we've been talking?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So I think, so currently the language that you're seeing on the screen is the language that exists in the regulations. So I would say the one thing that might help with process right now is, does the commission want to review whether or not 50% of a bond that exceeds $10,000 can be surety on a case-by-case basis, or do they want to just blanket approve it? That would be like, I think, the basic small consideration that the commission can consider at this point, without fully diving into everything. Or if the commission just wants to table it and wait and say, you know, that could change, but there are other things that also need to change in this section, so we're just going to wait. But that would mean, I believe there's a project that somebody reached out to me about the other day about the bond, and it sounded like they wanted to do a surety bond. So I sent them over this language, and I've not heard back, but I also haven't followed up. They would have to, right now, they have to come to a commission meeting to get approval for if they want to do any portion of the bond as surety.
This is Commissioner Bassman. So is the yellow language essentially new language?
Jamie Frederick, and the Wetland Agent. The yellow language is the language that's been highlighted for consideration of revision. So that's existing language.
Excuse me, just to make clarity, that's existing language that you highlighted for discussion this evening?
Jamie Frederick, and the Wetland Agent. It was highlighted in 2018, but yes, that's the language of. So if you look at the comments section, it says, does the commission want to review on a case-by-case basis or change may approve to will accept? If leaving as may approve and going on a case-by-case basis, clarify if agent can approve or commission needs to approve. Identify criteria decision will be based. So that is existing language, and staff has indicated that further assessment of that may be for consideration. I believe that this is kind of came up when the commission was reviewing a request for 50% surety. And I think the question kind of was asked, do we need to look at this every time? Per the regulations, yes. is that what the commission wants? Again, I've seen that there's a lot of other things the commission would like to assess with this section, so I think that if the commission wants to make a change, it would be appropriate, but I also understand waiting so that it doesn't appear that the commission is saying, well, this is the change that's necessary and we're moving on. I think either would be appropriate.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I would just as soon like to wait until we've had a fuller discussion about bonds, the application, and then the criteria. The one man's opinion, especially if it involves a change in regulations, which we know would ultimately go to the public, et cetera. I think we need to be on firm ground and the same page as we discuss bonds, given the fact that it's, financial in nature. Again, one man's opinion.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So on that note, do you want staff to continue to move forward with research and processing this in tangent so that if they line up, it lines up with the rest of the regs being ready, or proposed regulation amendments being ready, it could be done at the same time? Or do you want us to table this and focus on the rest of the regulation revisions for now and then pick this back up afterwards?
This is Commissioner Bassman. If it can be done in context with the other changes, et cetera, I think that would be great. At the same time, I don't want to take away from the effort that's going to be involved in the other regulations. So I guess I, for one, would leave that up to you, Jamie, as to whether you can incorporate this into the overall changes that were being considered.
Okay. Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. The next note is pertaining to section 14.6. This is the, make sure I get the right title. Enforcement section. So at the last section in the enforcement portion of the regulation states, the permittee shall immediately inform the agency's staff of problems involving sedimentation, erosion, downstream siltation, or any other adverse impacts which develop in the course of or are caused by the work herein authorized. To me, it seems a little bit odd that it's in the enforcement section. It seems like it should be more in a permitting section. That being said, I kind of just picked this out the other day, and I did do a bit of a dive in the past regulations, and it has been in the enforcement section for a while. I don't know that it necessarily hurts anything being in there, but I also don't really know that how it wouldn't necessarily specifically apply to a permit, other than the fact that you have to be in compliance with your permit in order to be in compliance with your permit.
Commissioner Bassman, so are you suggesting this is more of just a rework of where it goes in the regulations, and in your next draft you'll include that within the permitting section as opposed to enforcement?
Possibly. I think Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, I think that's what I was getting at. It seems more like it would be like a standard condition of a permit than something that would be under the enforcement section of the regulations. But if commissioners would like, I can do a little bit more research to try and figure out why it was placed where it was placed before moving it.
Commissioner Bassman, I wouldn't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror on this one.
Or Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, we can just leave it as is. We currently have in section 1111 of our regulations, which is the general provisions of all permits, the permittee shall take such necessary steps consistent with the terms and conditions of the permit to control stormwater discharges, to prevent erosion and sedimentation, and to otherwise prevent pollution of wetlands and watercourses. So if the commission wants, I can just strike that one. We can focus on more relevant and pressing matters.
Commissioner Bassman, that works for me.
Okay. Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. That brings us, I believe, to the fees. So it's my understanding that the commission kind of wanted to do a full review of the fees. I think from a staff vantage point, if I had to pick one comment regarding fees, is I would suggest and recommend that the commission adds back in the de minimis application fee, either calling it de minimis or minimal impact. It doesn't overwhelmingly matter, but I do think it would be appropriate to add it back in. I did an assessment the other day, and from 2008 through 2017, when the new regs went into effect and removed the de minimis fee, about 9% of the applications were processed with a de minimis fee. So it was definitely being utilized, and I think it would be appropriate and beneficial to add it back in.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, did you uncover any evidence as to why the de minimis fee was eliminated in the new regs?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I honestly have not looked at that recently anyways. I'm not sure why it was removed. When I looked briefly at the proposed regs from 2017, I didn't see an immediate reason for why it was removed. I'm sure if I did
as a follow-up question, is that typical to have a de minimis fee as you have looked at other towns?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I have glanced at some of the surrounding towns' regulations and fees. I have not done as deep a dive as I would like, but yes, other towns do have a de minimis fee. Some towns break it into like a two-tier bracket. I think just having a simple de minimis fee, it's either de minimis or it's not, works. But surrounding towns do have that fee.
Thank
and
you.
Other towns do call it minimal impact fee, which is why I'm also mentioning that name. I haven't seen anyone else that calls it de minimis, but it's the same thing.
This is Commissioner Boda. I don't remember the why, but I think to Jamie's point earlier, we've missed it, and we've spent a lot of time going back and forth on how can we get someone down to essentially what is the de minimis fee. And I think that if it was just part of the fee structure, we could refer to it, and that would be that. We could clarify why we were using it, but essentially it's like we threw out the wheel, and then every time it comes up, we have to carve the wheel out. So I'm very much in favor of returning it.
Any other commissioner feel different than Commissioner Boda? Okay, so the suggested language you're putting in front of us. Okay, there we are.
So the suggested language would be a minor modification. Before it was de minimis application as determined by the agency. It has, or its agent. I would say it should say duly authorized agent, since or if we add agent back in, I feel like we should still use duly authorized agent. It was $25 previously. I would recommend $25 unless the commission feels that the amount should be changed.
Commissioner Basserman, do we need therefore to define what a de minimis application is?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. I don't think that the commission needs to. I have seen other towns provide a general description and then end with a clause that says, or other activity as determined by the agency. So I'm not really sure ultimately what it lends to, other than like they'll specify sheds less than 200 square feet, above ground pools, greater than 50 feet away from a wetland. So if the commission wanted to work at doing some of that, so that way people could say, oh yeah, my application fits into that, we could do it. But I don't think the commission necessarily has to.
Commissioner Basserman, I guess the only, in some respect, benefit of trying to give examples, if you will, and maybe not criteria, but examples, is that for the public reviewing, the regs and what they would expect to pay, et cetera. It gives them a little guidance. That was the only reason for my raising that issue.
This is Commissioner Rose. It seems to me that the base fee or de minimis fee or whatever label you want to put on it is what you pay when you walk in the door to get a permit from Wetlands. And if it's not de minimis, it's something else. And every fee ought to be, it never ceases to amaze me how government agencies want to worry about a $25 fee when it ought to be probably $1,500. But in any event, if we start with 25, every application is $25 unless it's this, in which case you go to the tables and you calculate it.
Commissioner Bassman, that sounds reasonable to me. So I guess
I agree.
If that's the case, then maybe this becomes, instead of item 3, to Commissioner Rose's point, you make that the first condition, and then everything else falls out in the event that it's not de minimis.
Right. So the standard wetlands application fee is $25. And if the area of disturbance is 200 square feet or greater, see the tables above, in addition to the $25.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So the planning and zoning does have kind of a similar structure in the sense that they've got, what they have is, I believe they call it a zoning compliance fee. So their basic zoning permit is the zoning compliance fee and the $60 deep fee. And so if you're going for, like, say, a special exception, you would pay whatever fees are involved with your special exception. So the special exception fee, the public hearing fee, the deep fee, and the zoning compliance fee. The zoning compliance fee is kind of associated with the issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance, which we don't have an equivalent in inland wetlands, but I could try and figure out a similar way of setting things up, and I think it wouldn't look too odd to people because they're similar structure in planning and zoning. Sounds like
Commissioner
that's...
Bassman, I think it would be good if, based on Commissioner Rose's comments, Commissioner Boda's comments, that if the structure at least was similar between P&Z and inland wetlands, I think that helps the public.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. To that point, inland wetlands currently, and I would probably assume moving forward, it bases their applications on area of disturbance. Planning and zoning doesn't do that. They have thresholds for size of the building. So it won't look the same, but I think it will look similar. If that makes any sense.
Okay.
I can put the zoning, sorry.
Go ahead.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I can put the zoning fees schedule into the Dropbox so commissioners can kind of take a look at it before the next meeting and better understand what I'm saying.
This is Commissioner Rose. I mean, it makes sense that ours relates to area of disturbance. It's perfectly reasonable. We don't care about buildings. We care about dirt. So area of disturbance solves that. You should at least charge what they're charging. So if they're getting 60, we ought to get 60.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So yeah, if you look at 19.5A, the top line, deep fee, all applications, it says and violations, require subdivision of a deep reporting form. This is true. And the current fee as designated by the state of Connecticut. The fee only applies to applications. So I would propose a minor modification there. And this is the fee schedule, so the fact that a deep reporting form is required, I don't think needs to be in there. I think we can just say all applications require submission of the current fee as designated by the state of Connecticut. So that's another proposed change that I would recommend the commission move forward with and put in the
deep fee is set by the state and that money gets passed up to the state?
For the most part, yeah. So currently it's $60. We don't have that number provided in the regulations because it may change. And 58 of it goes to the state, and $2 the town retains as a processing fee.
So the next part B ought to be that the Branford Inland Wetlands application fee is, pick a number, $60. And in the event that the area of disturbance exceeds $200, refer to the fee below in addition to the $60. It just grows from there.
This is Commissioner Boda. I'm running out of time for this evening. I'm up against grading finals, so I don't know how much.
Commissioner Bassman, Jamie, how much more do we have in the fee area?
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So I would say that I'll just quickly kind of try and highlight the things that I have listed.
But I mean, do we have an hour's worth of discussion?
I think if we were to go fully through them, yes.
Okay. So maybe if others are feeling some time pressure, et cetera, it would be worthwhile kind of bifurcating where we are and leave the rest for another session. I guess my concern is we have tripped over area of disturbance in the calculation versus certain applications a number of times. So I think we're going to end up spending a fair amount of time talking about the concept of area disturbance. And I don't want to shortchange that given the time constraints that folk may have.
So this is Commissioner Boda. When we have done some of this deeper work in the past, it's a smaller subcommittee of people who are more interested, or it's in some of these aspects has formed, and then the subcommittee kind of brings its recommendations to the full commission. I don't know if there's anybody interested in doing a subcommittee, but doing that groundwork and then sort of sharing with the full commission, similarly to the way that Jamie has, but it's the commission's initial work. I don't know. I thought I would mention that because that's been helpful in the past, so that the full commission is not pulling 2 solid meetings a month.
Jamie Frederick, and the Wetland Agent. Eric, if you're on mute.
Thank you. Keep forgetting. Just picking up on the last thing you said, Commissioner Basserman, instead of the area of disturbance, which can be subjective and can certainly incentivize people to try to conceal what they're going to disturb, you might relate it to the amount of wetland on the subject property and or the amount of upland review area on the subject property. Those are easily calculated. The surveyor can add that information along with the flagging that exists on their property. It's not subject to debate. It just is what it is. And making it so you don't have to think about these fees would be the goal. It just gets generated. Read it off the plan. It got generated by somebody else. It's not subject to review or argument, and it creates a fee, and you're done, and move on to the next item.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I think that part of the thinking behind that impact was almost kind of opposite of what you said, right? So the more you're aiming to impact, the greater it's going to cost. And so the incentive is to stay away from the wetlands.
Agreed. Although speaking, if you think about the construction side, you're trying to, the Wetlands Commission is trying to protect a fixed area for a fixed purpose. You can see it, you can put your hands on it, you can calculate what that area is. Whether I want to disturb my property outside that area or clear on the other side of my property, nowhere near that area, shouldn't be the measure. you can, if you're after the money, you can figure out a way to back into the equation you want. But at the end of the day, if the upland review clips the corner of my property by 10 feet and I want to disturb 4 acres, who cares? It's only on my property by 10 feet. And it's just simply not fair to impose a 4-acre fee on me because I am the poor soul that got clipped on the corner by the upland review area. So if you modify the rate at which you charge for the thing you're protecting, you can get the fees that you want, but it can be a lot more fair when you look at sort of a whether or not what they're disturbing actually has anything to do with the area they're disturbing, what the slope of the land is in that area relative to the upland review, et cetera, et cetera. You can go through and come up with all kinds of qualifications. But if you just look at the area that's regulated, that we're concerned about protecting, if you wanted to add to that area of proposed mitigation, then the size of those areas become easily determined by a third party. They don't have to be checked by us or argued over, and they just generate a fee. And if you change the rate, you can get to the same fee you might have gotten to if you were calculating how many acres they were disturbing. But at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to arrive at the area you're calculating on, and it's tied to the thing we're protecting, not some sort of randomly charging them for their own property and what they're doing with it.
This is Commissioner Basserman. I know the last time we looked at this, it was apparent both within the subcommittee as well as the full commission that, you know, this largely turns out to be kind of a balancing act. It's subjective in nature, and you know, folk had different views on how we ought to protect the wetlands. But I think what's on the table is something that Commissioner Boda commented on, which is really a process question about whether we want to, given the nature of this particular area and the impact that it has not only on us but also on the applicant, whether we wanted a smaller group to kind of do some cranial work prior to the full commission needing to reserve some time to discuss it. I for one would be willing to, you know, sit in that small group to kind of go over this, and I'm hopeful that others, if they're interested, would join. I do think it would be a good use of time, given the fact that we seem to be meeting now quite regularly on a twice-a-month basis.
I think it's a good suggestion.
Jamie, at this point, Commissioner Basserman, at this point, can you send out, I guess, an email with a request for a few people, and I guess maybe we need 3, tops 4, as a small group to review the fee structure, not only the area of disturbance, but the other fees that might be suggested, and see what kind of feedback we get regarding people willing to sit, and then we can kind of move forward if we have appropriate numbers.
I think so, Commissioner Boda, and maybe Jamie, you were going to go here. I think the difference between 3 and 4 is a quorum and not a quorum, and like, I don't know what don't remember what the process is for like subcommittee meetings, and if they have to be the official meetings with a quorum, but if you did 3, then that wouldn't be necessary. I'm not really, I don't know. I'm just wondering the difference between the 2, and if you could just do the 3. The commission's not huge right now.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think a subcommittee could be 3. I don't remember the full process. I think my recommendation would be for us to allow me some time to look into the full process, and then maybe at the special meeting next week when we are doing the just cause hearing, only other thing we'll add is consideration of establishing a subcommittee to review fee regulation revisions. And then that way I can have all that information and be more confident in what I'm saying before I try and guess.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I think if you look back at the last review of fees, Jamie, you'll find that I think there was 3 members of the subcommittee. Whether that was in forum, in appropriate forum or not, I don't know, but I think there was only 3.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I'll take a look at things and just make sure that we're following the correct process. And so I urge commissioners to consider whether or not they'd like to be part of that subcommittee, if that's something they're willing to do, so that way we can quickly assess that at the next meeting.
Sounds good. Any other issues for tonight before we adjourn the meeting? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Commissioner Boda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good evening. Thank you for participation. Good night.
Good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.